decisions for long-term positive impact rather than, getting yourself into other areas. So, let me click on this. There we go. So a little bit about myself. My name is Justin Castelli. I'm a certified financial planner. And I'm a husband, a father, I'm a financial advisor, I'm a founder, I have my own firm. I'm a hip hop junkie, a washed up hooper, and I'm an avid worker-outer. And I know work-outer is not a real word, but that's me in a nutshell. So I have my financial planning firm where I work with everybody from young professionals to retirees, and now I'm starting to work with entrepreneurs. I have 2 blogs. I have one called All About Your Benjamins, another one called The Entrepreneur's Blueprint, and I have 3 podcasts that I host/co-host, All About Your Benjamins, The Entrepreneur's Blueprint, and Reversion to Mean. So you can see that I love sharing information, just trying to put my views and my expertise out for other people so that they can learn and improve upon it. So there was a question that came through early I can hit real quick about how did I become a CFP. So early in my career, I've always looked real young. I'm 37, so I'm starting to look, I've got a few gray hairs, I'm starting to look older, but early in my career, I looked very young. And I knew that the Certified Financial Planner designation would bring some credibility to my career. So I went out, and basically that's a series of coursework. It's a pretty intense test, and once you pass that and have enough experience, you can use the designation. As I'm going to get to later on, I think the CFP designation is the gold standard amongst financial advisors, not just because I have one, but just because it indicates that we're about planning, not just one area like investments or insurance, but we're talking about everything. And it also carries the responsibility of being a fiduciary, which I'll explain what that is later on. So to become a CFP, not too much different from what you're doing. I went through an 18-month coursework over different areas, passed an exam, and then I was able to have the designation. So that's how the CFP came to be and why I went after it. Real quick, I got to do a disclaimer. We're going to be talking about some personal finance areas. These are not meant to be recommendations. I tried to keep them vague and general, but they're not meant to be recommendations. You've got to talk to a professional about your personal situation. I think everybody understands that, but we have to throw these disclaimers out there because everybody's situation is different, which might mean one recommendation was suitable for one person would not be right for the other person. So if you have any questions, reach out to professionals, see what might be best for your situation. All right, and now that we got done with that, so decisions. I mentioned earlier that I chose this because I know a lot of you are going to be in a situation where when you complete your coursework and you're placed in your job, you're most likely going to see an increase in your income. And for some of you, it's going to be very significant. And one or two things can happen with this increase of income. You can spend more of it, or you can actually begin to build wealth and lay a solid foundation for the future. So I wanted to kind of talk about that decision and give you some reasons to consider the building wealth side of things and being responsible with that money rather than all of a sudden we have extra income. I'm just going to go spend it on things that aren't really going to help you in the long run. And the reason is not everybody is in a position that you're in to see your income increase significantly upon completing a course. Yes, you're going to have to pay Lambda back and you probably have some other things, but all things being equal, your income's going to jump. And with that difference in income between now and in the future, what do you do with it and how can you make a big impact? And hopefully I can convince some of you to think about the long term and making decisions today that will make a big difference down the road. So we can spend more or we can begin to build wealth. I lean towards the side of building wealth, but I also want to throw one caveat out that I'm a big believer in balance. It is possible to spend a little bit more while building wealth, but I think you have to find that balance and you have to be careful when you spend more. So I would be in the camp of saying as you kind of get the foundation laid and you're going through your career, it's okay to have a little bit of lifestyle creep, but don't let that lifestyle creep get too out of hand. And what do I mean by lifestyle creep? That just means as you make more money, you spend more money, so you're not really seeing your financial picture get that much better. You're creeping, your lifestyle, your expenses are creeping with your income. And that's where people make a lot of money but have nothing to show for it because they get the more expensive house, they get the more expensive car where they were living okay beforehand, and that increase they could have applied towards their long-term planning. So there is the ability to do having balance and do both. I try to do that with my clients, so I think that you can do that. But from the get-go, I think you err on the side of building your wealth and then bring in a little bit of lifestyle creep along the way under control. So the reason I'm a big advocate for building wealth is it gives you options, it gives you leverage, And I use that term with a hat tip to my good friend Tyrone Ross Jr. If you don't follow him, if you're on Twitter, you should definitely give him a follow. His handle's at TR401. And I'm going to give you all these slides. But he is a financial advisor based out of New York. But you should follow him because of everything else that he communicates that's outside of finance. He's a great guy. But he always talks about wanting to be in a position where he has leverage. And that just gives you more flexibility with being able to create the life that you want, which is ultimately why we do the things that we do. And it's why you're making this change in your life. You want to improve upon things. Building wealth gives you peace of mind. Knowing that you're not going to be living paycheck to paycheck. Knowing that you have an emergency fund to back up if something happens to the car or to the house gives you peace of mind of knowing you're not going to be scrambling paycheck to paycheck. And then ultimately it gives you freedom. If you do things right over the long term, you may put yourself in a position where you can walk away from the 9-to-5 job if you want to. You can position yourself to go create your own firm. It gives you freedom. You can't have that without having a sound financial foundation. And I know that a lot of these things I'm discussing there's a lot of privilege that comes with that, and not everybody has that. But the steps you're taking is putting you in a position to begin to have that privilege if you don't already have that, to be able to save, to be able to have less worries. So that's why I want to really focus on building wealth rather than I'm going to go spend more money because I make more money. Now, how do you build more wealth? If we go back to Accounting 101, maybe you've had an accounting class, maybe you haven't. Hopefully, somewhere between high school, college, you learn about a net worth statement. And net worth is just simply your assets minus liabilities. So building wealth would be increasing your net worth. And how would we do that? You can do it by saving, so accumulating. You can pay down debt. So one part of the equation is liabilities. So if you pay that down, your net worth is going to go up. Investing will help you get there, and that's your best bang for your buck, but that doesn't come without its own risks. And I put a little star next to that because I think investing is a potential topic for another day. I don't want to get too far in the weeds with that, but we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the other way you can build wealth is to create. I'm a big fan of entrepreneurs. Being an entrepreneur is not for everybody, but if that is a part of your genetic makeup and that's something that you want to do, I think that is something that you should pursue as well, but do it in a smart way with planning along the way. So you can save, you can pay down debt, you can invest to help amplify, or you can go out and create your own wealth by creating a business that will generate that income for you and that net worth for you. I do want to throw one thing to think about more philosophically. Wealth is, to me, wealth is more than just dollars. I think that wealth to me is more of a quality of life. I think there are a lot of tremendously rich people that are not wealthy. I view wealthy as relationships with family and friends, the ability to do the things that you want. I think you want to be wealthy over rich. And I know those are semantics, but I think that whatever definition you look at, when you create this wealth and you're looking at the wealth that you want to create, don't forget to include the quality of life, because eventually you get to the point where more money doesn't make your life better. You know, taking that next promotion or the next job may mean you have to work more, and now you're missing your kids' games. Is that really worth it? Are you happy where you're at? Are you content? If so, I think you're living a wealthy life. So as we talk about building wealth, yes, today we're talking about money, but also incorporate that quality of life that you want as well. I think that's very important. Money gets the focus, but I think quality of life is very important as well. So I'm going to give you the cliche statement: if you don't see it, you won't miss it. So as we think about you get through the program and now you're getting placed at your job and you're getting hopefully this big increase of income, how do we start being responsible with it? And I think the answer to that is before you even see that first paycheck. Whether you're going to ballpark what you think you might get in that first job out of the program, or you know what it is before you first start, I think you want to start allocating dollars before you even see that first check, because if you don't see it, you're not going to miss it. What I mean by that is looking at your expenses and what your future expenses might be, and then allocating your dollars. And I have an example I want to work through because I think it'll make a little bit more sense. But go ahead and plan for that additional income that you're going to get on a monthly basis. Where are you going to direct it? And try to set things up automatically so you don't have to think about it. So when you get that first paycheck, everything's going where you want it to go, and you're living on what you're used to living on, or maybe you give yourself a little bit of a lifestyle creep and you give yourself a little bit more of a monthly income so that you live more comfortably, but you're accomplishing other goals along the way. So hopefully that makes sense. Look at it beforehand, because if you get that first paycheck and you see that bigger balance in your checking account it's a lot harder to go back and start allocating funds for the future than if that first paycheck comes and it's a little bit more so you feel better, but you have all these other moving pieces in the background taking care of you for the long run or to clean up some things in the short term. So for the example, I just picked an $80,000 a year salary and some very basic components to it. So this is not perfectly exact, but the numbers I think will illustrate what I want you to see. So our scenario post-graduation is $80,000 a year salary, 100% 401k match up to 6%. And we're going to take out insurance and other things that would reduce that. And I'm just going to assume a very basic 20% tax rate. Because what I want you to see, what we're going to get to is, what is your monthly income going to be after taxes and those expenses have come out? So now you can begin to look at, here's what I used to make, here's what I make now, and here's where I'm going to divert these other funds to accomplish goals I have for the future. So at 20%, you're going to pay $16,000 in taxes. We're going to do the 401k right out the gate because that's free money from the company. You want to get that. So that's another $4,800 you're going to have go out. And then we're going to figure out a 17% payment to Lambda School along the way. That's going to come out as well. So the reason I say this is not perfect, somebody might want to call me out on it, is the 401k might be pre-tax and it might mess up what the actual net income is going to be, but it's still going to give you the same illustration. We don't need to get that granular to the penny of what it's going to be. The concept is what I want you to see. So the remaining income for the year, when we deduct all that out, is $45,600 after tax to live on, or $3,800 a month. And I intentionally put budget in the middle real big to be distracting and draw your eyes to it and not the numbers, because that's going to be very important. That's how you're going to figure out where you're going to direct this money. So this $3,800 a month that you now make hopefully is more than what it was before. Again, this is take home, so this is what you're going to spend. How do you allocate that before you get your first paycheck? Well, the budget, hopefully you have one, and if not, maybe leading up to graduation and completing the program, you want to start looking at the budgeting for your household. And I put down at the bottom, Tiller Money is a real good program. I think it's $50 a year. It's a Google sheet that basically you link your accounts into, your bank accounts and investment accounts, and you can run reports. It'll pull in all the transactions. You can see what's going on, but it'll pull in pie charts, graphs, other things, so you can really track your business. It's very much like mint.com if you're familiar with that platform. I just like it. I have no affiliation with them other than I use it and like it. So that would be a tool you could use to help on the budget. But once you figure out your budget, you look at your expenses and your income, the extras where you want to figure out where to direct it. My industry, financial services, loves rule of thumbs. And rules of thumb are great, but I also think that they're not perfect for everybody. So I think they're a good starting point. And when we're looking at how do we allocate your dollars, there is one rule of thumb that I think it has some good merit as a starting point that we could look at. And it's the 50-30-20 rule of thumb, which says of your net income, 50% goes to your needs, 30% would go to wants, and 20% would go to saved. So then we go back up to our example. That would mean we'd have $1,900 a month for your needs. And needs would be housing, food, basically food and shelter and transportation. $1,140 for wants and $760 to save every month. And that's in addition to your 401k. I don't think you should get too hung up on those exact numbers. I think one of the conversations we need to have is, I'm going to come back in a second, is needs versus wants. So what is a want and what is a need? And sometimes that line is very thin. Things that we think we need are actually wants. Housing is a need, but a very big house that you don't need, all the space, I would view more as a want. So you need to be able to be honest with yourself and have a conversation of, what are the things that I absolutely need to survive? What are those things? What does that add up to? And what are my wants? And honestly, if you wanted to, back to my rule of thumb, you could combine your 1,900 and 1,140 to create a overall want and need bucket. And I would be in the camp of saying, as long as those wants and needs fit into that number and you are happy, you have a good quality of life, then I think that is success. I'm not going to be the one that says you should have a low car payment and a better house. If you value your car more than your house and you're happy living in a very small house that has a very low rent and you have a Tesla, Do I think that's the best use of your money? No, but if it fits within these percentages and you're building and working towards goal, who am I to tell you what you should place value behind? I can make the case that a Tesla is a depreciating asset. It's not as good for your money as an investment, but you've got to enjoy your life. So that's where that balance comes into play. So come up with what your numbers are and then begin to plug the dollar amounts in for each of those wants and needs. And if it falls within those numbers of reason, then I think you're on success. Because if you're saving 20% of your income plus the other 6% you're doing to your 401k and you're getting a match, that is a heck of a start. What blows these percentages up? It could be that you have a lot of outstanding debt, big student loans that we're trying to work off. Those you figure those things in, and there's always going to be trade-offs. But if you are able to stick to numbers like this and plug things in, and maybe you sacrifice, so maybe your wants go down because you want to save more to hit a savings goal, that's fine. But this just gives you a parameter to get started, and it's better than having nothing. And as time goes on and you get a better grasp of your budgeting and your income, you can tweak those numbers. If you want to make it 55, 25, 20, so be it. As long as you have a plan and you're living within those and you're progressing towards your goals, then whether you follow those percentages perfectly, it doesn't matter. I don't think. I think the main thing is having a game plan, sticking with it, and knowing that game plan is getting you to your long-term goals and it's making progress towards building that wealth that you need. And notice in there's room in the budget in those wants for those things that aren't necessarily the smartest things. If you want to go, to a lot of concerts, if you have another hobby that you have that would be, it's an extra, there's room for it in the budget. So this is not saying sacrifice everything to build. This is saying fit those things in there, identify what's most important, and make sure you're covering your needs, make sure you're saving, and then enjoy life along the way. Again, all going back to balance. Some more rule of thumbs to take away. If you're trying to gauge, this new job is going to take you somewhere, or you want to upgrade some things, how much should you spend on housing? Well, that rule of thumb, I don't love. But the rule of thumb there, if you were to Google it, is 30% of gross income. And I made sure to highlight gross because in the past, I've been talking about net. I think when you look at a gross income number for your spending, you kind of can put yourself in a little bit of a bind because you're not really living off of that gross number. So you can use that as a guiding point, as a starting point, and then look at that number relative to your net income and then decide, does that make sense? Am I willing to give up some of my wants for this need of housing and have a higher payment? Does that make sense? Transportation, they say no more than 10% of gross income. Again, I don't love using gross income because we've got to take into consideration that may eat up a higher percentage of your net income that would make sense. But these are all starting points. Look at the numbers. How does it match up to your income? Do you need to make changes elsewhere to make that fit? And what's most important to you? And again, I just want to make sure we notice that on those rules of thumbs when you go out there, they're talking gross income. I think that those numbers actually might be a little high depending on your personal situation, but also your personal goals as well. Okay, sorry about that. So wants versus needs, building up that wealth. I just want to stress again, I mentioned it before, rarely do individuals find themselves in a position where they can significantly increase their income in a short amount of time of completing the course. You guys are working hard, you're sacrificing, and the payoff is going to be you're going to have potentially a big jump in income. Your kids going to college don't see that. They go to school for 4 years, and a lot of them go out just making enough. But probably a lot of you are in that situation. You're in a different position. I would hate for you to be in 20 years out looking back and wishing you would have heard this talk or had somebody inspire you to start saving and building wealth, and instead you bought a bunch of stuff. Again, what's important to you dictates how you live your life and what you plan, but you don't want to work forever. You don't want to stress forever. Chances are finances today aren't where you want them to be, which is why you've come to the Lambda School to improve things. Make sure that once you get that improvement, it was worth it all, that you're building wealth, you're putting yourself in a more secure place. That's my biggest hope for all of this, is it sparks a new thought process of, okay, when I get done and I have this new job, it's a new way of life, and how do I make sure that I'm making myself financially secure now that I've been given this chance? So a little bit of financial planning 101. Check my time, make sure we're good on timing. Okay, good. So financial planning 101. hopefully you see the value of building the wealth and going down the savings route and building that. Again, balance, treat yourself. You get done with your program and there's a purse that you want to buy or some shoes that you want to buy, treat yourself. Like, again, balance. You have worked hard. You deserve to treat yourself, but then get back into the program of let's make sure we're making progress and building upon things. So when you're going through the basics of a financial plan, you've got your budget in, you figured out how you're going to save, how you're going to allocate your funds. What are the things you need to be thinking about? And I wanted to give some things above and beyond just savings. I'll turn my camera back on. I'm going to record this as well to turn this into like a video for YouTube. So first thing first, you want to make sure you have an emergency fund. And I'm sure you've all heard this before, but an emergency fund is just that. It's a pot of cash that's there in case an emergency comes up. Could be house related, could be medical related, but it's money you can get to quickly. And this does have a rule of thumb of 3 to 6 months of your needs in cash. So the real reason we talk about emergency funds as financial advisors is if you were to lose your job, do you have enough money to maintain the needs to get you to the next job? I would argue that in the time of a need like that, you're not going to be going out and doing a lot of things. You're kind of in survival mode. So you need to make sure you have the basics covered to get you to the next opportunity. And then you can build the emergency fund back up. An emergency fund, typically you're going to keep in a savings account. I would go look at online banks. So you've got your local branches you go to, and they don't pay you very much in the way of interest. But you go to an online bank, they're FDIC insured, they link up, they pay you more interest because they don't have branches and a bunch of people to pay. Another reason I like the online bank, especially for an emergency fund, it's out of sight. You've got to go log into a different website than you would normally log into to check on your normal spending. So it's one more step to go get that money, and you have to transfer it. So it kind of puts it out of mind, so you're not going to use it for other things. It's really there for that emergency. So you want to make sure you have your emergency fund, and I would say that would be one of your early on goals is to try to get that funded and moving early on. Do that pretty quickly. Moving outside of money, life insurance is a very important part of financial planning. It's not a fun topic because we're talking about death. It's also not a fun topic because there's a lot of salespeople out there that give people, sell people insurance policies that are not right for them. So it's no surprise people don't want to have that conversation. They don't trust the people selling it, but it's important to have. And especially if you are or if you're going to become the main wage earner for your family, your life just became that much more valuable. As crazy as that sounds to say, but you're going to be needing to replace more income. So looking at the amount of insurance that you need, does this job change require you to get more to make sure that your family is protected? You could probably find a rule of thumb. I don't have a rule of thumb for life insurance because it's very dependent upon your personal situation. Typically, you want to make sure that you're covering any outstanding debt. You want to cover final expenses. And then you start getting into personal goals, needs that your family might have for the future. So for me, I have 3 boys. If something happened to me, I want to make sure my house is paid off. My wife has money to grieve my loss or the loss of me. The boys' college is taken care of. And then I want to have some extra money to kind of jumpstart some retirement savings that my wife won't be able to make because my income's not there anymore. Some people, those other goals aren't concerned. It's really up to you, but it's a very important thing to have if you have people relying on you for survival. Disability insurance is another one that's not a lot of fun to talk about, but it's important. 1 in 4 young Americans are going to go through a long-term disability, which means you can't work for a period of time. And usually if you're not working, you're not getting paid. Maybe your employer has more flexible opportunities, but your greatest financial asset is your ability to earn. Excuse me. And if you can't earn, that creates an issue for you and your family. Disability insurance kicks in after a period of time to help cover your income. It doesn't fully replace it, but it's designed kind of like an emergency fund to buy you the time to get healthy to where you can get back to work. Now, life insurance and disability insurance can usually be obtained to some extent through your employer. I am a fan of owning my insurance and owning, both insurances. And the reason for that is, as a financial advisor, my job is, where are the holes in your plan? What are the risks that we haven't identified? This is probably not going to happen, but what if you are changing jobs? What if you decide to leave and you get injured or you pass away? And the insurance that you had to protect your family was tied to that job that you no longer have. Now there's nothing. So there's different types of insurance. On the life insurance, there's different levels of disability insurance. Again, I think that is a talk for another day. I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but these are the things you want to address. So look at what your employer offers you. Meet with a financial advisor or a professional to figure out, is that adequate for what your needs are? But make sure you have those coverages there because, again, you're working hard. Hopefully we live long lives, but as life has shown me through experience, life isn't always fair. And we want to make sure that your family is protected if something happens to us. And again, with this increase of income that might be coming, the need for insurance might be greater now because of the reliance your family is going to have on that new income. Debt, pay down debt as quickly as you can, especially if it's high interest. If you have a lot of student loans, you may want to consider consolidating those student loans to help out on the budget. Sometimes you can consolidate to lower interest rates. I do want to make sure that I mention, if you are considering consolidating student loans, be careful because sometimes the terms aren't as great. Sometimes the loans that you may have could be forgivable depending on where you might be working in what industry. And if you consolidate those, you lose that government forgiveness. So just make sure if you go through that progress, you're aware of the terms that you're leaving and the terms that you're going into. You want to avoid adding and carrying balances. And mainly what I'm talking about there is credit cards. You don't want to overextend yourself, live beyond your means, and have a bunch of credit card debt. I do want to just mention, not all debt is bad. Debt gets a bad rap. It causes a lot of issues for people. It adds stress. It takes away from our freedoms. But you can leverage debt for good. I view a mortgage within reason if the amount's the right amount for you. I view mortgage as good debt. It's, usually right now it's a low interest rate. You're purchasing an asset that one day you will own. You're leveraging the bank's money at a decent rate to buy an asset that's going to be hopefully appreciating. I view that as good. Car loans I don't think are bad as long as they're good terms, but it's really when you start getting into credit card and overextending yourself where the debt becomes a problem. So if you can avoid that, that means you're able to save, and that's going to be allowing you to build wealth. Remember, net worth is assets minus liabilities. Debt falls under the liabilities, and if your liabilities are going up, your net worth is going down, and your wealth is going down as well. So be mindful of the debt. Don't be afraid to use it for the right reasons. Avoid it for the wrong reasons. And it's not on here, but if you're disciplined enough, which a lot of people have issues in being disciplined, you can leverage the credit card for the points, and you can get free travel and you can get cash back. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're honest with yourself and know that you're going to pay that off every month. The points aren't worth it if you're racking up ongoing balances with interest rates at 20%. But if you can pay it off every month and you've got that discipline, then by all means, use those points to go take a trip or get yourself something by just using your credit card, being responsible. So you can do that. A lot of people do it. You just have to be careful. And then investing. So this is the one that sometimes gets a lot of excitement because this is the lottery ticket that sometimes people see. I don't think you should view investing as a lottery. But when it comes to investing, I think your 401k is a must, especially if there's a match. That's free money that you don't want to miss out on. Compound interest is your friend. It's actually your best friend, and I'll explain to you what compound interest is if that's a new term. And I think that investing would be subject to another brown bag talk another time because there's a lot of things we could talk about when it comes to that. I do think that beyond the 401k match investing should be a little bit further down the ladder, maybe up the ladder of importance. I think that you should be getting your emergency fund established first. If you have a lot of high interest debt, you should be working towards that first and then work your way up to investing. Again, the match on the 401k, I don't think you should give that up. But other investing, I think there's other priorities that might take precedent before you get to that level. But that definitely should be a goal, is to be doing additional investing down the road.
Justin, it's Austin here. Can you take a quick second and just explain the 401k match? We've got a lot of people who might be familiar with that, but then others who may not be familiar with that yet.
Thank you. So 401k match, let's go back one step. A 401k is a retirement savings vehicle that's offered through your employer. If you go to a nonprofit like a school or a hospital, you may have a 403b. It's the same thing. The numbers and the letters are from the tax code that creates them. But basically what a 401k is, it's like a savings account that you direct money into, and you'll have investments options to try to grow your money. The match component of it is, a lot of times, especially right now with the job market the way it is, employers want to incentivize good employees and retain their employees, so they offer benefits. And one benefit is going to be a match to the 401k. So in our example earlier, I said there was a 6% match, which says if you divert 6% of your income into this 401k for future savings, the employer is going to put 6% in as well. So basically, you're saving 12% into your 401k with only 6% of your money going in. So the reason I say that's free money is you save 6%, the company puts in 6%. Usually there might be some type of vesting schedule, which means you have to stay at your employer for a number of years to get their match. But if you exceed that, when you leave, whether it's retirement or take a new job, you get to take that money with you. So you basically just doubled your contributions by doing it. So that's what the 401k match is. As far as investments, you have everything, and well, there's usually a lot of investment options in there, which is where you kind of want to rely on a professional or doing some research on your own to figure out what's the best way to invest it. So 401k is just a retirement savings vehicles. There's some specific things that have to go with it as far as when you can access it without penalties and things of that sort. But just view that as that's money that you're earmarking to be there down the road to help you in retirement so you don't have to work forever. So let's come back to compound interest because that ties into the investing. And basically compound interest is interest on interest. And when I describe compound interest to my boys, and I've gotten to talk to their schools before, there's an analogy that I have no idea if this is exactly true, but there is an example. If you were to fold a piece of paper in half 42 times, which is physically impossible, but if you did, that piece of paper would go from Earth to the moon. And it sounds crazy, but folding it in half is the physical example of compound interest. Compound interest is earning interest on top of interest, interest on interest. And that helps your money grow faster. So there's simple interest, which is just the same interest rate on your principal. But now interest means if you earned interest this year, your interest is growing on top of that and it compounds and grows faster. I have an example here to show you how that works to your benefit. So let's go fast forward a couple of years. And this is going to show you the power of compound interest in investing. We're going to take $10,000 of your $13,600 that you're paying to Lambda, and we're going to say we're going to apply that towards savings. For the last 2 years, I've been paying that to Lambda. I'm not used to living off of it, so I never had it. So let's just go ahead and divert that before I see it. Again, if you don't see it, you're not going to miss it. So we're going to save that money. We're going to invest it. You're going to continue to do your 6% on your 401k, and this isn't including any increasing. This is just basic numbers to show you the power. So every year you're going to save $14,800. You're going to invest it, and 7% I think is a pretty conservative interest rate for a long-term 30-year investment horizon. I don't want to go too crazy and paint a big picture. So 7% interest earned over 30 years, you would have basically $1.4 million saved. You would have only saved $444,000 of your own. I say only. $444,000 is a lot of money, but it's worth 1.4, and that is because you averaged 7% growth over those 30 years. So it's growing on top of each other, on top of the earnings, which helps get you there faster. So that right there, $444,000 of principal being worth $1.4 million 30 years down the road is a pretty powerful example of how investing and how compound interest can work for you. Now, will $1.4 million 30 years be enough for you to retire? That depends on what your goals are, but that's a heck of a way to help get there. So that's why I put that star next to investing before. That gives you your biggest bang for your buck. I want to mention one thing though. Getting to that 1.4 million is not going to be an easy ride. Investing is very emotional. It's a tough thing to do. There's doom and gloom headlines that might make you. This would be assuming you stayed invested and stuck with your investment plan the whole way. So there's a lot of things that can happen between now and 30 years out that would impact that number. But if all you take away from that in compound interest is it will help you grow your money over the long term faster than you could do on your own. And I've read somewhere this quote is not true, but apparently Albert Einstein said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. I read that he didn't really say that, but I like to think that he did. That just shows you that one of the smartest men in history realized that compound interest is extremely powerful and something you should leverage to your benefit. So sticking with compound interest, another way for you to understand the power of it is this thing called the Rule of 72. And if you go out and Google, there's a financial advisor in New York City that's on CNBC, and he's a friend of mine. His name's Josh Brown, and he just did an awesome video about the rule of 72, where he went around, I think he went around Bryant Park in New York City, asking people if they knew what it was and trying to help educate them on what the rule of 72 actually is. And it's great because it's funny and it's also informative. But basically, if you're trying to think about how can you make your money work for you, how can you grow, how long will it take you to reach certain levels, you can use the rule of 72 as a real quick gauge. So what that says is, if you have an expected return for your portfolio or your money, doesn't have to be an investment portfolio, we go back to our assumed 7%. If you divide 72 by your expected return, that will tell you how many years it will take for your money to double. So at 7%, it'll take us 10 years for our money to double. And that's, again, compound interest working on your behalf. So another way for you just to understand the power of saving early and investing is that every 10 years, your money's going to double. So the more 10-year periods that you give yourself, the more your money's going to double and the more it's going to work for you while you're enjoying life. So the rule of 72 will give you a good example of how compound interest can work for you and how it can help you grow your money faster than you can do just by saving on its own. So hopefully that makes sense. When it comes to investing, my last little piece on that, I've talked about returns. Returns from the market when you're investing are out of your control. So I think that the biggest benefit you have in understanding investing and planning for the future is focus on the things that you can control. Focus on your behavior, so not getting spooked out of the markets and taking yourself out, but saving is one area you have control over. So making sure that you go back to the budget, allocate dollars to savings, that's something you have control. You can't control what the market's going to do day to day, year to year, but you can control how much you're putting towards your future wealth. And when I say future wealth, there are investment vehicles, again, another talk for another day, they don't always have to be just for retirement. When you get things going, you have your emergency fund, you're on pace for retirement, there are other avenues to invest that will help grow your wealth that you could access in the future. So if you are that entrepreneur and you have a goal of in 10 years or so, you want to start a business, you could be investing for that future business in other areas that you would have access to without penalty. So investing doesn't always mean for retirement, but that's the one that I think a lot of people always go to right away. So from the investment talk and the planning talk, don't miss out on compound interest and think of the rule of 72 to show you how quickly or how long it might take for your money to double. If you are risk averse and you don't want to be very risky, then you're going to have to give yourself more time for your money to double. And make sure you go check that video out because it's pretty good. So I've given you some stuff. I want to also give you a blueprint for kind of how all this works. And this is where I'm going to plug my profession, not myself, but my profession, and that a financial advisor can help you with all of this. I don't think you should expect yourself to know all of the ins and outs of creating a plan for the long run. That's why people like myself have a job. And historically, financial advisors have not been there to help young professionals or people without a lot of net worth. But there are a lot of advisors that have different business models that are geared towards working with people just like yourself. So the help is out there. You just need to know where to look. The XY Planning Network is one area. It's a network of financial advisors that all specialize working with young professionals. It's not based off of assets. It's not based off of net worth. There's a lot of great advisors there who want to help you with your financial planning. So if you're looking for help, this is not your area of expertise, today you can find it. And I think it will be worth it. But what you would want to do, the blueprint would be create your budget. We've talked about that already. Build that emergency fund to make sure anything in the short term you have covered. Start paying down debt so you can get that weight off your shoulder. And then when that debt is gone, that's more money you have to apply towards your long-term goals and saving. Or going back to balance, that's more money you can put in your today living to have more experiences. Get the 401k match. Save for other short-term goals you have. It's not just retirement goals that we have. If you have a goal of taking a big trip or buying a new home or buying a new car, build that into your budget. Put that into the wants and needs categories and start saving for that. And if you really want to get itemized with it, this is what I personally do. I have like 7 savings accounts. I have a savings account for emergency fund. I have a savings account for taxes. I have a savings account for travel, for home repairs. They may not all have a lot of balances in them, but I have them allocated. So I know that trip I'm going to take in 3 years, I'm saving for it. When that time comes, I'm going to have the money there for it. I get to take my trip. I don't have to worry about where the money's going to come from when the time comes. So save for other goals, identify those goals and put those into the budget. And then when you get to the point, invest, invest, invest. Start that early as you can. The sooner you can start, the better. We'll save how to do that for another conversation, but just make that a goal of yours to be in a position to where you can be investing, because that's going to be the best thing for you in the long run. So a quick regroup: allocate your new income before you receive it. And again, this is under the assumption that most of the people going through the Lambda program are going to be improving their income. If you're not improving your income, I still think you should go through the budgeting. I still think you should do your needs and your wants and identify that, carve out your savings, and you can still go through the same exercise. You just may not have as much of an impact to be able to do more right away. But hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully most of you are going to see a big improvement. Automate as much as you can. Once you identify the savings that you're going to do or the payments you're going to do, set that on cruise control so you don't have to think about it. If you have to go in every month and transfer money from checking to savings, you might not do it. But if you know that you get paid on the first, set that up for the second. That money gets transferred over. It's out of there before you can spend it, and you don't even think about having to do it. Just make it easier for yourself. Create as many behavior hacks as you can so you create less work for yourself so you're doing it without actually having to do it. Define your needs versus wants and stick with those numbers. Again, if you want to combine those two numbers together and say, I want to piece needs and wants as one expense, and as long as everything fits into that, I think you're okay. Who am I to say what you value is not the right thing? As long as it fits within your numbers and you see your picture moving in the right direction, then I think you have the right to live the life that you want as long as it fits in with those parameters. Make sure you have your emergency fund and your family protected when it comes to insurances. Compound interest is your best friend. Begin investing as soon as you can, but not at the expense of the fundamentals. I'm not saying go invest before you have your emergency fund, because investing brings on risk. And if you have an emergency and the market's down, you might be in trouble. Get that liquid emergency fund and then move on to the investing. And then also, money is emotional. Money makes people stress. Money makes people worry. Enlist a professional to help develop a plan and keep you on it. And you don't always have to have an ongoing relationship with a financial planner. You could work with one that does hourly planning, get a plan in place, all the recommendations that you need, and then execute it yourself. So you can get the help that you need at a reasonable cost so that you have some guidance. And if you want that ongoing relationship, you can have that as well. So I did want to, before we kind of get to questions, I did want to chime in with a couple of pieces of career advice that I've experienced, especially over the last couple of years, that I think could be very valuable. So this is beyond budget and everything. Don't underestimate the value of networking. I think for some people, networking seems a little icky, and it can be, but your personal network will bring friendship and opportunities that you never dreamt of. So I'm here speaking to you today because of networking I've done on Twitter. Networking doesn't always mean networking for that next sale. Network with other people within your profession, because doors open up and connections are made. Don't view other people in a similar position as necessarily competition. View them as colleagues and the mission for the greater good. So be sure to take time to network, whether that is within your organization, whether that is in different social media platforms. Go out and network, because that is a very valuable asset. I'm sure you've all heard it's not what you know, but who you know. Unfortunately, in today's world, there's a lot of truth to that. There are a lot of people who get promotions or get new opportunities because they knew the right person, not necessarily because of the qualifications. If you have the qualifications, which you all will, and you know the right people, that's the recipe for success. I mentioned, a big fan of entrepreneurship. If you are entrepreneurial, then I would encourage you to follow that calling. Maybe it's not right upon completion of the program, and do it with intention and do it with a plan. So I'm not saying everybody should go start their own business, but if that's part of who you are and that's a vision that you have, then just as you're going to plan for your new income and budgeting, plan for that potential opportunity down the road. And know that it's not easy, but going out and starting my own company was one of the best things I ever did. It's brought family life balance that I want to have. It's been rewarding financially. And then it's also been a great balance to be able to do things like this. Because if I worked for a bigger organization, I'm not going to be able to hop on a call like this and talk with all of you. So I just want to encourage that. If it's not for you, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with working within a corporation, going in and doing your job like that. I have no problems with that, but I just want to encourage those that have that entrepreneur spirit to follow it, just be smart with it and plan for that when the time comes. And my final piece is just be genuine in everything that you do. That's one of the things that I've held as a core belief for me, that everything I go into, whether it's relationships with my clients or reaching out to people and networking with them, is I want it to be for a genuine reason. I don't go at anything with an ulterior motive, because I think that at the end of the day, that ulterior motive comes out and it just messes everything up. I don't know if it's karma or whatever you want to call it, but be genuine with the relationships that you take on. Be genuine with why you go after certain opportunities. And I think that that'll help you as well. So those are non-planning wisdom nuggets I hope bring some value to you as well. And that is the last of my slides. So I wanted to make sure we had time for questions because I gave you a lot.
Yeah.
You know, it was a fire hose of information, and that was one of the things. So the last few nights, I've tossed and turned in my mind, changing the outline, adding things in, moving things around, because I really wanted to make sure that I could make an impact today and give you a little bit of guidance on kind of how you can take this opportunity and make it what you want it to be. And a lot of that's going to come back down to the finances. It's because I'm sure that's a big part of why you went down this path. I mentioned the family balance of things might be as well, but ultimately you probably went down this to improve your financial situation. So you've got to Lambda. You're going to have the opportunity. I wanted to be able to give you some guidance on how you can take this new opportunity and build that foundation and make that progress that you want to make. So hopefully I was able to do that, but I want to make sure we can answer questions and elaborate on anything that you want to hear more about.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Justin. So we've got some questions in the Slack thread, so we'll get to those if we don't have any, but we're going to experiment here. So you can all unmute yourself. Please don't all unmute yourselves right now, but I want to try this. If somebody has a question, Justin really wanted to be able to interact with you all. So if anybody has a question, just go ahead and unmute yourself. If you talk over each other for 1 second, that's okay. Just let the other person go, and then we'll get to multiple questions. But let's try this out. If anybody wants to ask a question live, just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask it. Come on, somebody.
You might have mentioned this, but when you were talking about the 401k contribution, should that be part of the 20 and the 50-30-20, or does it come out elsewhere?
Hey, 1 sec, just before you answer, I think whoever just said that, like, introduce yourself real quick and tell Justin who you are and maybe like where you live, just so he gets a feel for it.
Sorry, my name's Michael. I'm from southeastern Minnesota.
All right, Michael. So the answer to your question is one that advisors give a lot of times. Depends. So what I would tell you, my advice would be, I would look at that 20% after your 401k, depending on the other needs that you have. The reason is that's supposed to be 20% of your net income, and this gets into the weeds a little bit. There, you can do pre-tax or after-tax savings to your 401k, but to keep it simple, I would strive for do your 401k and then do the 20% on top of that. So technically, in that example, that individual would be doing 26% savings.
Anyone else got a question they want to ask live for Justin? If not, I'm going to ask a question. So that means you all should jump on it.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Jordan. I'm from Amarillo, Texas, and I'm a recent graduate and recently hired as well. My partner has a degree in finance, in business finance, so I know some of these things that you've sort of gone over already. Early in our partnership, he gave me a book by Ramit Sethi, I believe, that I Will Teach You to Be Rich. Mm-hmm. And I still haven't read it, but have heard a lot of good things about it. So do you have an opinion on that particular book?
So first off, Jordan, congratulations. I have not read the book, but I will be reading it. I mentioned my friend Josh Brown, who did the CNBC video about the Rule of 72. They do some video interviews, and he and a couple of the guys at his firm actually had him on to talk about the book. And it seemed very good. Now, I think that some of the advice that he puts in there is a bit extreme, But the good thing about extremes are you can pull back from those and still be in good shape. So from everything that I've heard, and I take the word of the gentleman who had them on the video very highly. I respect them very much. They all had good things to say. So I would co-sign that book and say it would be worth reading.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else have a question?
Hi, yeah, I actually have a question. My name's also Justin from Boston, Mass. What would your thoughts be on passive income?
On passive income, Justin, I think that it's a good goal to strive for. I think passive income brings its own challenges to it. One of the most obvious ways to get passive income is through real estate. Real estate can be an expensive investment to get into. It has other nuances as far as property management. So there's those things to consider. You could also have passive income in the form of some side businesses that kind of run themselves. So I think building passive income is a great thing. If you could go into later in life with a few streams of passive income, that would be great. So I think that is something that if that is something you're interested in, I would work on building that into your financial plan. But I would set the expectation that would be probably something that would be a little bit further down the road, depending on where you're at today, to get working. I would say I'd want to make sure you had an emergency fund, your 401k is going, maybe you're doing some other investing that gives you a little bit more liquidity, and then start building towards that passive income. Because typically a passive income source is going to be less liquid. It's the income is why you have it. But I would not be against passive income. I know some people that have no stock market investments, have nothing but real estate. It's a bunch of rentals, and they have a great life because of it. That's not my expertise. That's not my risk tolerance, but I definitely think passive income is a good thing to build. And to be honest with you, I have some other projects that I'm working on that complement my financial planning firm that I would view as passive income that I want to build into my life. So I look at, we get into investing, we talk about diversification, spreading your assets around, diversifying your risk, because it's not all in one area. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. I think that the topic of passive income is diversifying your income. Don't put all of your income in one bucket. You go and you have your employer. If something happens to your employer, all of your income goes away. But if you do have a passive income on the side, you do have some income coming in to help out. So I rambled on that. The short answer to it, I think passive income is great to add to the picture. It has its own challenges, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't go for it.
So more or less, it's not necessarily the safest investment, more of a risk.
I don't think there's any investment that I would call safe. Everything has its own risk and it has its own opportunity cost. So I think depending on what the passive income project would be, you could define more of what the risks and the opportunity costs are. So I'll use real estate because that's the one that I think is the easiest to visualize. To me, the risk with doing a real estate passive income is you're tying up capital in the property. So it's in the house. You have a mortgage on it potentially, or if you buy it outright, your liquid cash is in that investment. If you don't have a tenant, who's going to pay the mortgage, or you're not getting income coming in from it. So I wouldn't say that it's more risky. It's a different type of risk, and it might be harder to identify all of the risks to that. Where I can tell you with the stock market what the risks are. I can't tell you when they're going to happen and to what levels. It's not without risk, but I wouldn't say it is overly risky either. It just depends on the type of passive income project.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. We are at 4 o'clock, Justin, so I definitely want to be respectful of your time. If you have another few minutes, we might be able to hit more. I want to ask one question, though, and I think it's a big one for our students, specifically because, they could be in situations where they're going to have substantially more income, and they may have to move to go to work at their new job. So, and this is a huge topic. You could probably talk for 20 minutes on it, but do you just have some general guidelines or some ways to think about renting versus buying a house with the idea of like this transition and higher income and stuff like that?
Yep.
Knowing it's a very personal answer.
Yep. I'll hang on as long as we need to. I don't have anything. We have soccer practice at 6:30. So between now and then, I'm all yours. So actually I smiled when you said that. Renting versus buying was one of the topics I took out just because I didn't think I'd have enough time. There's been a lot of research and evidence lately that shows buying home ownership is not as good of an investment as we like to think that it is when you factor in all the expenses. You factor in taxes, maintenance, all of that stuff. When you look at the life of owning a home, you really don't make as much money as it seems on paper because you have to factor those costs in. Taking out that, I'm always in the camp of when you're moving and making a change, unless you really know the area and you really know the commute from your place to work, I think you're better off renting. I don't buy into the stigma that renting is throwing money away because, again, we can look at the numbers and home ownership is not as good of an investment as it seems. And in the first couple of years of home ownership, the majority of your mortgage payments are going to interest anyways. You're not really accumulating any principal. So technically your first years of owning a home are throwing money away also. You're paying interest. So I would, if I had a client that was moving, I would encourage them to rent first. Make sure the area that you're going to land in is where you want to be. The schools are where you want to be. There's not something crazy about the commute that's not horrible, because on paper it might look like makes sense, but maybe the only way into work is horrible and you'd be better off living somewhere else because your commute would be better. So I think renting, there's less commitment to it, which allows you to be more flexible. And I think flexibility is good, especially when you're moving somewhere new. And then once you know that you're ready to put roots down there, that's where you're going to be. The company's everything that you want it to be. You're happy there. Then I would look to buy. And at that point, that gives you more time to save up money for a down payment potentially, so you're not underwater on the mortgages. There's a lot of benefits to renting in a transition.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Anybody else have any questions they want to ask? Let's give a shot.
I've got a quick question, if I can.
Go ahead.
Basically, I'm a student right now, so I'm kind of like starting to rack up all these student loans. I'm wondering, is it more advantageous for when I graduate and I get a job, is it more advantageous for me to pay them all off immediately? Or is there some value in waiting a little bit and kind of using my money to, I don't know, match my 401k or make other side investments? Or should I just like pay it off absolutely once I can?
Good question. And going back to the disclaimer, not true advice here. I'm just covering my bases because this is going to go out on YouTube and I just want to make sure I don't get in trouble with regulators. It depends. So the reason I said the things I would tell you to take into consideration to determine what's the best course of action, I would look at your interest rates. What's the amount of interest that you're paying on those loans? And the reason is you can make the case that if they're low interest rates, you could take your money elsewhere and earn better, and at the end of the day, come out ahead. So if you're paying 2% in interest, chances are you could go park the money in an online savings account and earn 2.2, and from a number standpoint, you would be better off. I would like to see somebody fresh out of college, even with student loans, work on building up that emergency fund and making your payments so you don't get behind, don't wreck your credit, but work on building that savings up so that if anything happens, you're covered. And then once you get that savings to a good level, maybe it's the 3-month level. You don't get to the 6-month, but at 3 months, you start to save a little less and begin to apply more towards the loans to start to pay those down. So interest rate's really going to drive my answer. If it's a high interest rate, then I would want you to work towards that a lot faster. But if you're in the 5 to 6 to 7% interest rate, then I think you have to weigh what could you do long-term with the money? What's your personal preference? Some people want to get out of debt as soon as possible, and there's value to that to them. And I can't quantify how you feel about not having debt. That to you could be so worth it that you would forego a couple years of savings and compound interest to get that done, and then you're really going to ratchet up later on. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you so much.
I would add on, you mentioned other investing. I would not go heavy on other investing until you had a good dent into the student loans as well. So I'd look at emergency fund, start working more towards the loans. And as those start to come down, you can kind of shift over and do some side investing as well. I would do your 401k match though. I wouldn't miss out on that.
Awesome. All right. Last question. Who's going to ask it? Does anybody have one? Last opportunity.
I have one, but if someone else has one, I already went. So I'll give someone else a chance quick.
My name is Marcos. I live in Southern California. What would be your recommendation for someone that has a 401k, but they don't want to leave it with the company? Because I've been bit in the past where their investment decisions were pretty poor, and I know there's like third parties you can have your money allocated toward?
Typically, so let me ask, in the past, was it investment in like company stock that burned you, or was it just within the company 401k?
It was within the portfolio that company put. You know how they take your money and they basically put it all into their companies, and they ended up actually losing money in the long run.
So I'm trying to think of the best way. So with the 401k, the performance of the company you work for should not be impacting your portfolio. What should be impacting your portfolio is the underlying investments that have been chosen. So if they chose that for you, they may have done a poor job. While you're working, unless you're 59 and a half, you're not going to be able to move your 401k. The 401k has to stay at the employer as long as you're working. Now, there are some rare instances where they open it up that you can invest it however you want, like at a TD Ameritrade or somewhere, but it's still tied to the employer. Once you separate, you don't have to leave your 401k there anymore. You can roll it to like an IRA, or you can roll it to your new 401k. So I would say as long as you're working, it's going to have to stay inside that 401k platform that they've chosen, whether it be Fidelity or Charles Schwab or wherever it is. And then you're limited to the investment options that are there, but you should be able to find investments that they're going to go with the market. So I would say when it comes to investing, if that's not your cup of tea and something you enjoy, most 401k plans have these target date funds, which basically it'll be Vanguard 2050 or whatever the year might be. And the way those funds are designed to be more aggressive the further away from 2050. And as it gets closer to 2050, it gets more conservative. So I always lean on the target date funds for clients just to make it easier. So I know that they're diversified. They're at a relatively appropriate level of risk given their age, and they don't have to think about it too much. And as you get closer to retirement, you might want to tweak it. So I don't know, Marcus, if you're going to be able to, move it out of the 401k while you're working.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll cut it off there, Justin, because I know you'd stay, but I want you to get back to your family and what you're doing. Thanks again so much for joining us. So I guess the last thing is, and thanks to all the students who stayed and the students who came and see this later. But how can people find you if they want to find you on Twitter, or learn more about you or what you're doing? And then maybe one resource or something that you like to read to keep up with financial stuff.
Sure. So my Twitter handle is where I spend a lot of time on Twitter. It's at Justin Castelli. So I'll make sure when I send this to Austin, however they send out my notes, that this is on it as well. But it's at JUS10 CASTELLI. So that's my personal Twitter. That's where I spend most of my time. And then I have a blog, All About Your Benjamins, which is allaboutyourbenjamins.com, which is really geared towards general personal finance and investing. And then there's the entrepreneursblueprint.com, which is more geared towards people who are interested in starting their own businesses or already their own business owners and kind of going down that path. So those are two ways you can read some more. If I was going to give one source of information when it comes to personal finance, I don't even think I would give a book. I would refer people to a blog by the name of A Wealth of Common Sense. So the author of that, his name is Ben Carlson, and he's actually affiliated with that firm out in New York that had Ramadan and the YouTube video. But it's A Wealth of Common Sense. And the reason I would refer you there is Ben writes a lot of personal finance stuff. So it's not only investments. There's some of that's in there as well, but it's more about financial planning, bigger picture in life, things that you should be doing. And the reason I like a blog over a book is it's consistent and it's up to date. So a book may get out of date, where Ben's writing multiple times a week and it's updated with new information and new numbers, and it's more applicable to where we are in life today. So I would probably send you to Ben's blog.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. And we'll include all that stuff in the presentation when we send it out, all the links to that stuff. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to end the chat now.